Hello and welcome back. In the last video, we set up the HTML for our Pokemon Chrome extension, which we can see right here. This code inside the section is basically what we worked on in the previous video. If you have not done that yet, go ahead and go back and do that, because this video is going to build on top of that. In this particular video, we're going to be building out all of the CSS and all of the styling and design for our Chrome extension. So if you look at my screen here, on the left is what we have currently. This is the basic HTML without any styling. Not very attractive. Doesn't really look like a card at all, but we're getting there. We have the basic elements on the page. And what we're going for is this, which looks like a Pokemon card, essentially. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through all of the CSS styles that we're going to apply in order to get from here to here. Okay. So the first thing that we need to do is actually start inside of our HTML document. And if you notice, inside the head of our HTML document, we never actually changed the title to our document. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm going to change this to just say the Pokedex, a little bit more descriptive. But there's one more thing that we need to add up here in the head, and that is a link to our CSS file, because now we're going to start adding styles. Okay, so I'm going to add a link tag, and this is a self-closing tag as well. In here, I need a relationship tag, which is going to be set to style sheet. And then I also need a source for that, right? Like I need to know where that is. And instead of source, we actually use href here. And I'm going to set that to popup.css because that's in our main folder here. So that's the path to our CSS right here. But inside of here, we have nothing. So as we can see, nothing's really changed at this point. And the first thing that we're going to do is reset any browser styles simply by selecting everything with an asterisk. And inside of our curly braces, we're going to put our properties that we want to apply. And so here we're going to put a margin of 0 and padding of 0. And that's just going to reset any of the styling that we have. So now you can see everything starts on the edge. There's no padding or border, or margin. And then we can start styling the different parts. Now, what I'm going to do just to make this a little bit easier for me is I'm going to move this screen over. And because we're working in vanilla HTML and CSS, it's easier to see both my HTML and CSS at the same time. So if you're in VS Code, you can follow along with me. What I'm going to do is grab my HTML file and drop it sort of right here in between these numbers and this border right here. And that's going to split my CSS off to the side. So now I can see my CSS and my HTML right next to each other. Okay. And I can still kind of see what's going on here. I'm going to actually make this a little smaller and just keep this so I can see the design of what we're going for. Okay. And you can just follow along with me. I'm going to add all of our CSS styles so that we get to where we are here. And I'll explain them along the way as we go. Okay. So the first thing we need to do, typically when I start building out CSS, I start from sort of the more broad things and then get more specific. So I want to set some styles for things like body, general text tags, things like that. And then we'll start identifying by IDs and classes and add styles that way. So the first thing I'm going to do is style our body. Now, if you remember from our HTML, we have our body is this tag. So this is going to be everything that we see, pretty much the main outside of the edge there, right? So the body is going to be this yellow that we see in the background. And if you look closely, the yellow actually goes from this darker yellow almost to like a white and then back to a darker yellow. And that creates this effect of some almost like plastic shimmering, right? Like a playing card would have, sort of like a plastic covering, right? And so it doesn't look as flat as it normally would. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add a linear gradient to that background. But before we do that, we need to set a width and a height for our element. So right now we have this big wide thing, and we're going to actually set the width and the height of this. Okay, so to do that, we're just going to use width. I'm going to set it to 300 pixels. And then also I'm going to set the height to 450 pixels. Okay. And here I'm also going to set margin to 0. But I am going to add a padding of 10 pixels. Okay. And then we're going to add that background. So we're going to do background, and we're going to use a linear gradient. So you can see that popped up on mine, and it has the parentheses. And I'm going to do 90 degrees because we want to turn it to the side, right? So we're going from left to right instead of top to bottom. And then I'm going to add the 3 colors going from left to right that I want to use. And so you can use these as well. F2D03F is going to be the first color. The second is FFF7D1. And then the third is going to be the same as the first one. So I can just copy and paste that. And there we go. If I close and reopen, now I have something starting to look a little bit more. You can see though that this one is much larger, and that's because this image is so large. So if you want to see like the actual size, we can make the image a little bit smaller. I'm just going to identify, there's only one image. So I'm going to set a height for that of 25 pixels. Just make it really small for now. And if I close and reopen this, now the image is really small, and now we're seeing, you know, a more accurate size for our card. Okay, so now we have that background. You can see how we have the similar background here, but everything else still needs to be styled inside. So I'm going to leave this image just like that for now, just to keep it small so we can really see what's going on here. But there's a few more things that I need to do. So I'm going to actually pull this a little bit. Okay, so inside of our body, I want to set the display to flex. And I'm going to do line items, center, justify content, center. So that's just centering everything that we have inside of here. Okay. Now, I'm going to move on to do some of the heading styles and text styles, just because they're more general and I want to get them out of the way. So for H2, I'm going to set a font weight of bold. And I should probably spell font weight correctly. There you go. And then text transform and capitalize. So our H2s are going to be these titles, and I just want to make sure that everything is capitalized for them as well. And the reason why that right now, you'll probably notice it doesn't change much, but as we move forward, we're going to be pulling data from an API, and that data may not be capitalized. So we want to make sure that we are capitalizing it on our H2s. Then I'm going to add another code block, and I'm going to select both H2 and paragraph tags by including a comma. And I'm going to set the padding to 0 and margin to 0. Okay. And then from there, I'm going to style the HR, the horizontal rule that we have. So that's going to be like a custom color. Otherwise, it would be just this black color or this gray color. But we want to set the color for that. So we want to set a border of 1 pixel solid. And then we're actually going to set it to a somewhat transparent color of black. So I'm going to do an RGBA value, and we're going to set it to 0, 0, 0, and 0.25. And that's going to be 1/4 opacity. And then I'm going to set a width to 95%. So I want it almost all the way to the edge. Padding is going to be 0. And then margin is going to be 0 for the top and bottom, but for the left and right, I want auto so that it centers. Okay, so now if we look, not really much change there yet, but we're about to see more pretty soon. Okay, so now I'm going to start working on some of our IDs, right? So the main one is our card. Okay, so that's going to be basically this orange inner piece is our card. So if we look at where that is, it's right here. So we have our body and then our card, which contains everything inside of it. So when we identify IDs, we use the hashtag. And so I'm going to do hashtag card and then my code block. I'm going to do display flex. Flex direction is going to be column. Justify content space between. A width of auto. A height of 420 pixels. Border radius of 10 pixels. It's going to give us that rounded edge. Padding of 15 pixels. And then here we're also going to do that background of linear gradient. And again, we're going to do 90 degrees. And this time we're going to use some opacity as well. So we're going to use, again, that RGBA value. RGBA, and it's going to be 252, 77, 23, 0.9. And this you can actually copy twice more. So we're going to do comma, paste, and we're going from this almost fully opacity to 0.5. So we need to change that middle one. And so basically what this is it's a color value with an opacity attached to it. So right here, we're at 90% opacity. This is 50% opacity. So the reason we're doing that is we want to be able to see a little bit through that so we can see the background color. So now we have that value there. Okay. And if we want to see what it'll actually look like, we can change this width from auto to 280 pixels. And that'll just push that all the way out. So there you go. We're starting to see that it looks a lot more like, what we're headed towards, right? We have the card pretty much built in terms of like the card itself. Now we just need to style a bunch of the text. And of course our image there too, okay? So the first thing we're going to do now is work on this title section up here where we have like the name. Okay, so back in our code, we're going to identify that. And that's the title container, right? So we can see that section right here. It's called title container. So here it's called title underscore container. Okay. And inside that, we're going to do display, flex. Flex direction is going to be row. It is that by default, just so that you know, but I like to add it in there anyway, just so that other developers can see very clearly which direction it is. We're going to also do justify content space between. So this will push the space in between the two items. So what we're doing now is we're taking this title and this hit point value, we're flexing them in the row direction and then putting space between them. So we're pushing each one to the edge, essentially. So if I reset this, now you can see that's basically what happened. Okay. Then we're going to align items center, and this is going to make sure that they're centered. Right now they're sort of offset a little bit. If you watch as I reload, it'll center them. Now they're centered on each other. And here we can also set a padding of 0 and give it a height so that we're specifying the height of 20 pixels. Okay. And then the hit point value looks a little bit small to me, right? So we need to identify that and change that value. So we can do that with stringing these along. So we have container, and then we have a P value inside of there, which is that. So we can identify it like that. Oops, I need to spell that correctly. There you go. And so I'm going to increase the font size. Make that 20 pixels. And I'll make the font weight 500, which is about medium. Now if I reload, there you go, looking a lot more like our final product here, right? 1, 2. So the next thing that we need to do, let's see, the name probably a little bit. Just make sure that that's all set up. So name, and we'll do a font size of 20 pixels. Text transform, and we're going to do capitalize because, again, we're going to be getting this data from an API, so the name might not be capitalized. And then font weight, and we're going to do 800. This is like very bold. Okay, so there we go. We have looking more like the other one as well. Cool. Next thing is our image container. Okay, so we have this container, which is actually the background there, and the image is inside of that. And so we need to style some of that stuff. All right, so we're going to style our image container first. So that's going to be this. We have a div outside of the actual image. And so we're going to add a border. It's going to be 1 pixel, solid. And the color is going to be an RGBA value again. 255, 170, 0, and 0.4. 0.4. All right, so we have a border. Border radius. It's going to round the border. Width is going to be 100%. The background is going to be another linear gradient. F2D03 F. And then we're going to do RGBA 252 7723. We're going to do height 75 pixels. Margin of 30 pixels in the Y direction and 0 in the X direction. Display, flex. Line items, center. Justify content, center. And finally, a box shadow. 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 1 pixel, and then RGBA 0.15. So it's a very small shadow. Okay. And so now we're starting to get there, right? So we basically just built this box here that's going to sit behind our image. Okay, so now we can actually identify our image and set some values on that. And we already have our image, but I'm going to make it a little bit more specific in case, you know, in the future we want to add to this and we have multiple images. I'm going to just do image container image. So this is the image inside of the image container. Okay. So I'm going to change the height now to auto. So it's going to fit a little bit different, and we'll see that in a sec. Width 100%. Max width is going to be 225 pixels. Margin will be 0. And Z index is going to be 50. And I'm setting the Z index really high because I want the image to sit basically on top of everything. So like in this example here, you can see it sits over top of everything. And I just want to make sure that happens by setting a really high Z index. So there we go. Now we have a lot of the top done, right? We have the name, the HP, and our image, and you know our little box behind there. And now we really just have to do these couple boxes on the bottom. From here, the first thing that we have to do is build this section here, this bottom piece, which is like our attacks container, right? So we see that here. We have our 2 attacks inside of our attacks container. So I'm going to identify the attacks container. And in here, I'm going to set a padding of 10 pixels, display, flex direction, column, justify content, start, height, auto, min height, 150 pixels, margin 0, border radius 10 pixels, background color is going to be our F2D03F. And we have a box shadow as well. It's going to be 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 1 pixel, RGBA 0, 0, 0, 0.1. So very slate shadow. Okay, let's take a look. Now we have our attacks container starting there, looking pretty good. All right, and then now we have to style basically the inside. So we have attack 1 and attack 2. Okay, so we can identify both of those. Attack, oops, let's add our hashtag. Attack 1, comma, hashtag attack 2. Okay, so now we can apply styles to both of them at the same time. So we're going to do width, auto, height, auto, display, flex. We're going to do a flex grow of 1, flex direction of column, line items start, background color, and this is going to be EDDE99, and padding is going to be 10 pixels. Now let's take a look. Look at that. Now we have the inner part, and these are evenly spaced, looking nice, right? We do need to change sort of this title though, because the accuracy should be over here on the right, but looking good. So the next thing is that attack title container, right? So this here, we need to adjust those so they're flexing across. Okay. So we're going to identify those. attack. It's called attack1 title container. And we're also going to apply the same style to the other one, the second one, attack2 title container. Right, so we're going to do a width of 100%, display, flex, flex direction is going to be row, and justify content. And this is going to be space between so that we're pushing them apart again. So now if I reload, you can see it pushed this accuracy over to the right. And now we have everything in basically the right spot where it should be, right? We have the title, the accuracy, and the description below it. So the next thing that we can change is actually the size of this. So those are a little bit smaller than it has to be. So I'm just going to adjust that. So that's going to be, those are called attack1 accuracy and attack2 accuracy. I'm just going to set font size equal to 18 pixels. Okay, and that should increase the size of those a little bit. Yeah. And you'll see it, you know, that word is, it's not going to be accuracy. In fact, we can change that. Let's just change it to like a value. So we'll just do 100 and maybe 98 for this one, just so that we can see what it's actually going to look like. So yeah, more in line with what we're going for, right? Yeah. Okay. And then the last thing that we have to do is really the abilities on the bottom. So we have like a main container that's going to hold all three of them, flex them across, and then we'll have individuals. So we have this abilities container, and we're going to select for that. Abilities container. And we can just kind of look at like what we want here. Right, so we're going to have to add some styles to flex. So we're going to do a padding first of 5 pixels just on the top. So 0, 0, 0 for the rest of them. So we just want a little padding on the top. Push it away from the other stuff. And then we're going to do display, flex, flex direction, row, justify content, space between, and width 100%. So now we have them flexed across and we have space between. So they're basically going to leave space in between the actual items. Okay. And then we have to style the abilities and some of the content inside of there. So let's do those. So each ability, now we can, like, one of the different things that we can do, we've been using IDs this whole time. And if you start looking at this, there's a lot of things where we're selecting multiple IDs. And in a lot of these cases, we could use a class instead, right? Because with a class, we can identify multiple components or tags, HTML tags. So things like this are actually not very concise, right? We could write these better. So we're going to see in this section here when we do the abilities, another way that we could do that, and that is by using classes, right? So a class, we can apply the same class name to multiple different like divs or paragraph tags or really any tag, and we can style multiple. So in a lot of these cases, we're just using IDs because they're very specific and it's showing us like where everything is. It's easy to keep track of it, but there's another way to do it, and we're going to try some of that now. So instead of using the IDs, we're going to use an ability class name. And so this is going to apply to all three of these at the same time. So I'm going to do display, flex direction is going to be column. Background color is going to be that same EDDE99. Border radius is going to be 10 pixels. I'm going to do a width of 30%. Text align center, because we want to center everything. Padding is going to be 2 pixels. And we're going to do a box shadow. Again, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 2 pixels, 1 pixel, RGBA. And we're going to do 0, 0, 0, 0.1. So again, very slight shadow. So now we have started styling these, looking pretty good. And we're just going to style the text a little bit, and then we're pretty much done. So here, ability, and all of the H3s in abilities. We're going to do margin 0, padding 0, and then ability P, margin 0, padding 0, font size is going to be 18 pixels, font weight is going to be 400. All right, and there we go. We actually have pretty much built the whole thing at this point. If we look at, our finished product and what we have, they're pretty much the same. The only difference is we don't have any of the custom information yet, right? So right now we just have hard-coded information, what we wrote in here, but looking pretty awesome. Pretty cool how much we can build in just a few short lines of code. The next thing is we're going to actually start fetching some of this data from the Poke API. So that's going to be the next video when we discuss JavaScript and how to actually get the data and update it on the card so that you can get a new fresh card every time you press the Chrome extension. So very good job today. I know that was a lot. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out on Facebook. Love to help you guys out. And I'll see you in the next video.